Peace, Farmer Courtney here. Playing chicken with God, weather calamities, and reparations have been on my mind. And the reason why it's all related is because I've been watching some weather calamities that have been happening, noticing their increasing rate, which the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan warned us to watch the weather. And what that has to do with reparations is that people need to understand the connection. And so, that's why I make videos like this, never sure who's going to see it or what impact it's going to have. But I'm just noticing that Americans need to have the reason why reparations for foundational Black Americans and the increasing calamities of weather, famine, and how all of these things are related. And the best person to do that is the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Explained is a project that I'm working on because I was praying and thinking, how do I express what I'm trying to say? And really, it came to me, Elijah Explained. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad explained not only myself, my community, my family, and the way that I saw the world to me, and explained why things were the way that they were. He also explained how things can be different if we would, accept that we had to make a change and take certain action. So one thing Caucasian Americans and a lot of Americans don't want to touch, don't want to talk about at all, is reparations for foundational Black Americans. And I've made videos before where I encourage us to put the Muslim program before Congress. And with the height of dysfunctionality of the American government where it is right now, I would just say to put the Muslim program before the American people, because we need to change the conversation around reparations. God has to be in the conversation. Most Americans have at least heard of the Bible. Many Americans have also heard of the Quran. And one of the things that I, was struck by early on, because I knew of those books, I didn't know anything really about either one of them, was the scriptural references that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught that showed and proved that Black people in America are the fulfillment of the prophecies in the Bible. And because most Americans who are the most vehemently opposed to reparations believe in the teachings that are within the Bible and the God who is, powerful over all things that are unfolding, I just wanted to plant the seed that when you're asking God, why are these weather calamities happening? Because one after the other that they're happening, that the Malachi 3:4 passage that mentioned Elijah, you might want to look at that in a different light, because the calamities are not going to stop. I was looking at a derecho after photo, and if you don't know what a derecho is, it's like a land hurricane. It just levels everything. Maybe you have an hour warning, unlike a hurricane where they hype it for several days. So it just goes through an area and just levels everything. So not as destructive as a tornado because it doesn't go up also, but it just everything. So I'd shared there was one in Iowa where whole grain processing facilities that were made of metal, steel, and just crushed like an aluminum can. Silos, those giant, silos that are in all the children's books and things like that, just ripped out of the ground down to the rebar and the concrete, crushed like an aluminum can. We don't have any defenses against the forces of nature. So at this time, when all of the pressures, societal pressures of people just not being in agreement, all kind of fighting going on politically. We have governmental dysfunction. We have illness, plagues of different sorts. There is pressure, like insect pressure on farmers right now. Our apple trees are being this one that I'm looking at right now. No leaves. It had leaves in the beginning of spring. Caterpillars just eating everything. You hear their waste falling like rain at night. And there's two things that go along with that as a major risk. So one, it's going to affect the crop, could kill the tree. Two, it makes people who farm for a living desperate and open to using even more toxic chemicals than they ever would have imagined in a hope to save their crop. And that is not a scenario that you want, because that'll directly affect human health. And so, we have so many pressures and so many things on that I figured I would just share. What comes to mind all the time whenever I see these things is that Elijah must be explained in a different way to Americans, right? We have to understand the significance of how the foundational Black American experience plays out. And so all of the stuff that people feel like they have a right to say or have an opinion on, or all of that, we need to acknowledge that it's time to frame the conversation really differently and actually get somewhere, right? Because conservatives are freaking out about the way that the country is falling apart. Liberals are freaking out about the way that the conservatives are ruining the country, and they just want everything to be freed up and to be in a different way. And there's a third way that we really haven't had a lot of contact with, and that's not by accident. That's by design. That's by like the scrubbing of any type of holistic conversation about reparations off of the airways, to have it vilified, and then the removal of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who has no evidence against him of wrongdoing of any kind. It's like he was the wholesome, sane encourager, warner, offering a solution for all of humanity, but they removed him without just cause, just because they didn't want you to have access to his mind. They didn't want you to easily have access and feel like, oh, something new is emerging, and feel hopeful and feel encouraged. And they would rather you feel, really discouraged and feel as if, nothing's ever going to change. We're not going to get anywhere, because really there's no remedy offered anywhere in this world that has any type of hope of actually coming to fruition, because it's like there is so much discord among people that unless you have a divine solution, and that needs to be qualified too, right? Like, what does that even mean? How can there be a savior for all of humanity, right? Because a lot of times the religious messaging of today doesn't acknowledge the deep suffering that the original peoples have had for the creation of America. It's just this like heaven when you die kind of scenario, and it doesn't speak directly. And then for the people who have benefited, participated, and indirectly benefited from those activities that have harmed original people, there is a complete whitewashing of all of that away, of just like pray to Jesus and like it all goes away kind of thing. And so there had to be a new clarifying word come, which is a fulfillment of all the scriptures. And that has happened. A savior has come for all of humanity. And it even sounds, like, what are you talking about, right? Because people don't even talk like that anymore. The idea, I shouldn't say that, but like, it's not people. It's the messaging of that is that it doubled down on the previous, spiritual rhetoric of looking for heaven after you die, and like that, not heaven here on earth. Like, so, but to say in a really scientific way that a savior has arrived for all of humanity, and let's, talk about it. Let's show and prove. Let's show how actually there's a very practical message that has come of not only salvation for Black people to be delivered out of the condition that they find themselves in America today and all over the world, but specifically America. That is where the Savior came to find those lost sheep that were, cut away from the original family and brought to this strange land and in bondage for, 400 years and suffered. And it's more like 550. But anyway, you know what I'm saying? It's like, we don't have a reference. We have been so successfully turned around, kind of like pin the tail on the donkey. You just don't ever even get near the paper half the time. You're just like in space, just putting it out there. And so, it just is always so heavy on my mind when I see these weather calamities, because it's usually one farm or one area, one neighborhood. But these things are going to keep stacking and keep happening, one after the other after the other. And we're going to wish that we had the opportunity to do the right thing as far as reparations and fulfilling the request of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad for what Black people in America, foundational Black Americans, what they are owed, what they are due. And we're going to wish, right, when we're just wringing our hands and having nothing to eat and shelter out, out of doors, and have nothing and be far from things, like it's just so vivid to me when I take in the teachings. It is so vivid to me. I see things all the time. And so that's why I decided that, I'm going to do this more in-depth video, and I really don't care about if people think I'm crazy. Like, a remedy is needed. A remedy is surely needed. And just like how people think I'm kind of crazy for thinking a tiny little thing like homeopathy is going to do that. So a small shift in perspective of Elijah being explained is the remedy that all of humanity needs. And just like people who, don't order the remedy when I talk about homeopathy, or, don't stock up or don't study or don't think it applies to them, when you are afflicted severely is when you realize, like, oh, I should have, I should have listened more. I should have done something. And so I guess for me, it's just as, being a mother and somebody who has lived, far from things for the last 20 years, the level of affliction is unimaginable. Like, I've seen things in my mind. I put it all together in pictures and images, and it's unimaginable. Like, that level of destruction. And to look in the faces of those people and realize that, like, we had another option, right? We had another option. It's just that we didn't know, maybe, perhaps, right? So I'm just here sharing the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, being for all of humanity, because we have no defenses against the forces of nature. There is no way to play chicken with God and not end up dead, right? Like, so it may seem as if it's just, going to carry on and these wickedly wise are untouchable. They're playing chicken with God, and they're also playing chess with your life. They're collapsing the food supply. They're jacking the price of gas. They're doing all of these things to make life as uncomfortable as possible and to massively reduce the population. And God is allowing it because we have not been obedient. We're not getting the message, right? We're not accepting the invitation to come into the classroom of God and to understand that we need to turn the television off and we need to tune in to a message that's for all of humanity, so we can understand the time that we're living in and we can understand what must be done. But because we're not doing that, God is allowing them to just have their time to make it even more clear than before. Sometimes when you're teaching a lesson, if the person isn't getting it, you have to choose a different way. So we're kind of in the kinesthetic phase, right? So we are in the phase where we're going to feel it as deeply as possible so that we can turn our mind to the classroom of God and to take in the message of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And so that was just what was on my mind for number 35. I will say that I fell asleep last night. I read 8 chapters aloud to my children out of a book that we were reading, and I fell asleep. So I am back on it, but I did miss the day. So today would be 36. But anyway, I'm just, that's why today's message is a little bit longer. Yes, had to gear up for that. And one of the things that, speaking of remedies, that I think is what delayed this message last night was I spent a lot of time working on homeopathy curriculum and like lifestyle curriculum stuff. And I'm very torn because truly this, I feel like, is where I'm most useful. But I feel like the homeopathy is still incredibly important because we need to have some sort of like emergency ability to respond to things when all this stuff is falling away. So homeopathy is still really important. Getting our homes stocked with real food and potent natural remedies is key, because all of these different things that are tightening and falling apart, we're going to need to be able to do for self. But I do feel that this type of message is something that's uniquely for me to do, and there are, you know, dozens of people who can teach about food and can teach about homeopathy. So I'm trying to just kind of summarize the food and the homeopathy thing so that I can focus more on this type of messaging. So if you like this video, thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share it with other people, leave me a comment below if you have any questions or comments about anything that I said in this video. I would really appreciate to hear from you, get this conversation going, and until next time,